Hello, and welcome to our second episode of Conscious Citizens, Conscious Earth Citizens. I'm Mimi, and I am here with Kaika. And we are really excited to delve into this topic today. It's gonna have a little bit of a range, but we're really focusing on culture, past lives, and colonization, and various inputs around this. So be prepared to kind of cycle around a little bit as we delve and dive into things. So I actually want to start. I saw something the other day that really inspired some thoughts that I have on this. And so I'm going to start with my personal belief. It is my personal belief that we are all responsible for where we're at in the world. We're all responsible for the good and the evolution that's happening, but we're also responsible for where we're at and the places where we need healing. And we can all agree healing is needed in the world very clearly, right? So I stumbled across a something on Instagram where this person who was or is part Native American, but also part white, was stating that they believed that they didn't have any part in racial, I don't know what the right word is, but racism. They're not racist. They've been innocent of it. They haven't done anything, negative against other races, and so that they should be treated as innocent. And I personally can understand that. I personally don't feel like I've never ever done anything overtly overtly racist, overtly being the key there. And yet, again, my feeling is that we all are responsible for where we're at. And we have ancestors who we carry that DNA, we carry those energies. And regardless if we've ever done anything that we personally recognize as racist, because we've been raised in this energy, I often call it patriarchal energy, but with these theories, with these ways of being, with the ways of seeing the world, that a lot of times these deeper themes are very insidious in us and very hidden. And so while it may not be overt, while we may not notice it, there are those who are sensitive to how we show up, to what we're saying, to what we're doing, that could show us where the facts are otherwise. And so we want to kind of dig into that. It's really interesting that we're doing this in this timing. So we just had St. Patrick's Day, and I realized as I was having my personal rah about St. Patrick's Day, I've never been a huge fan of the holiday, being Irish myself, having some strong Irish in me. I never liked that you get pinched if you're not wearing green. And I never liked the idea of driving snakes out, as I have an affinity for all beings. And when I got older and realized that it was more about driving out the druids and the witches and the pagans, it really solidified my feelings about that. Now, oops, Spirit's with us. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to get turned off. So just listen to that for a second, dance to the music. The fact is that that's one tiny example of what's happened in the world on a larger basis, colonization. And so we're gonna kind of cycle and circle around this. Do you have anything that you want to bring forward at this time, Kaika?
Yeah, I mean, hearing what you said about the other person who said about the innocence piece, if we're talking about the genocide of Native Americans and the enslavement of African people, none of us here in this life did those things, right? So we are innocent of that. And the system was set up, that was the foundation for the United States of America. And so it's ingrained into our systems and on every single level. So while we didn't create it, we're living it and we're upholding it, you know?
Right.
And like you said, it's not always the overt stuff we see on TV is like, oh wow, my God, that's so racist, that's so wrong, it's so obvious that it's not a good thing. But like the unconscious stuff, like the way that we were programmed in the 90s to see Black people as violent, you know, because of the way that the media was. And that was the media's fault, you know, like as a child in the 90s watching Boys in the Hood, it wasn't my fault that I was seeing all of these images, but the associations are there, and I'm like conscious of how internalized racism, like I may have internalized that, you know. And so like while I also am very conscientious of how I treat other people, especially people who are more vulnerable than me, um I also need to look at how I may have internalized not just racism, but misogyny and homophobia, like transphobia. As a trans person, I have internalized transphobia, you know, like it's fucking it's in us. And so yeah, we're innocent and we're not at the same time.
Right.
But the good news is we're all in it. Like we're all in this mess.
Right. We are all in this together. And again, the healing comes when we recognize that these things could be there, are there, and just allowing ourselves to be open to it rather than slamming the door and being like, no, that's not me. I didn't do that. We all have to be very, I think part of being really woke, truly woke, or awakened, or, you know, in a state of evolution is recognizing I said this the other night in my scope. We're like kindergartners, we're like kindergartners learning. And so
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with admitting, oh my gosh, I was wrong. Oh my gosh, I didn't know. Um, and hey, I want to do better. Because I think that is, again, a key for like uniting and healing is, hey, that spirit of I want to do better.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I show up. I want to do better. um Now a lot of people like to bring up when it comes to other cultures, and I have done this myself. um Past lives, feeling a certain affinity for a culture. We talked about this a little bit in the Ho'oponopono video. um I'm gonna just share a little bit of my experience of that. So I have long had an affinity with multiple cultures, but I think probably the strongest one that I have felt is Indigenous, Native American. As a little girl, I was really very, very in tune. I never really realized how much. And one of my first experiences of tuning into this was a day I was homesick. It was like first grade, and I had to continue doing my homework. I think I was homesick for like a while. It may have been when I had scarlet fever. I got really, really sick when I was little. Um, so I was having to do my learning from home, and so I was reading. My mom was reading to me about the Cherokee Trail of Tears, and I started bawling, crying hysterically, talking talking about the oxen, talking about how the oxen were crying, that their feet were hurting, and talking about the people, like bringing stuff in that was beyond like what was in the textbook, because the textbook was like, oh, this happened. Here's a paragraph about it, you know. And I was devastated for the full day. I also have memories when I was little of looking at myself in the mirror and being like, what is this skin color? What is this eye color? What is this hair? I had this idea in my head that I should have darker skin and dark hair and dark eyes. I've had several more experiences with Native American culture or indigenous culture coming through for me. Remembering a past life grandmother. Animal medicine is something that came through and helped me during a really intense time. Um, so I have this very, very strong past life affinity. And yet one of the things that Kaika brought through in our last Ho'oponopono talk was about connecting with your ancestors, connecting with your culture. And I think that's really important in this to mention. culturally speaking, ancestrally speaking, ugh, I got some not so great ones. I don't really necessarily want to put on my hat about this. General Custer, who is known for massacring many Native Americans, is part of my ancestry. My family also has connections to the Mayflower, and so what happened with that is also connected in my ancestral field. Now I do have the belief that I have these memories and this strong affinity for indigenous culture, and I have this ancestral blood and these energies in me because there is a bridge to be made. But the thing is so often we do focus on, well, I feel like I was Native American. I was Native American. I have that, and we like to push aside and ignore that other. And yet it's really important, I think, for us to move through this. Kaika's brought that up, actually. Kaika showed me how it's really important to address these energies. So do you have something you'd like to share about that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, you're right. I feel like being honoring our past lives are super important, because I do feel like it's a karmic thing. And when I say karmic, I don't mean like punishment. To me, as a Sagittarius, karma is about learning. It's like, oh, I'm experiencing this energy from this perspective, and then I'm gonna go experience it from the other perspective, to get a bigger picture so we can tie it up in a nice, nice little package and send it on its way with love. And so it's really important that we honor those things. To me, I uh, I have sorry.
Okay. There's so
Huh.
many layers.
There are, and I'm like, which way do I go from here? But the boundaries are still there, like whether or not. So if we think about uh, global community and what it means to come together in peace and harmony, we're making space for countless spiritual paths, right? And so like it's a separation of church and state. We can't use our spiritual beliefs to justify something, in the same way that it wouldn't be cool if like Christians came to the table like, yeah, our book says we should rape women and not, I'm sorry, not rape women, but like, you know, dominate women, and kill homosexuals and witches. Like that's what the Bible says, and we wouldn't be okay with that. So like we can't do the same thing. Like I believe in reincarnation. Not everybody does. I believe that I may have been a black woman in a past life, and I have um visions and dreams of a black woman in slavery who, was raped and was a baby maker, and like she would cry and sing she would cry through her voice, and I would hear her singing in my dream, and it startle me awake. I would wake up with tears, like, whoa, like, and feeling that connection to this woman. And maybe she was me in a past life, maybe she wasn't. I actually use that as a connecting point to connect with black women, and yet I don't know what black women are experiencing, even though I might read articles and listen to lectures and surround myself with black women. I will still never know. And that's like a hard line, because it's acknowledging that's not my experience. And so this is like knowing that I'm on the outside of the house, right? That it's not my house. um and why it matters to connect with my own ancestors, because when I know how to behave in my house, in my ancestors house, and I know how to connect with my own culture, um i i I want to build a sweat lodge, Mimi. I want to build a sweat lodge because my ancestors had sweat lodge. My ancestors, the Taino people, and this what my heart and soul wants to do. And yet, I love my ancestors, and I'm waiting for them to tell me that I've been chosen to do this work, to make it abundantly clear that this is what I need to do, and this is how I reverence my ancestors. And I feel that I have, because I have this strong connection with them, and because I have so much reverence for them, I have an idea of how I would want outsiders to approach my ancestors' house. And that gives me a gauge for to using the golden rule. Now I know I might approach how I might approach an African or American or Black culture house. You know, how would I want my answers to be treated by an outsider? And the other piece is that it's a world tree. So if someone else's culture is over there, we're connected, whether by past life or just through the world tree. We're all connected, and that's beautiful. But I am connected to the world tree, literally and physically, through my physical body, through my biological lineage. And that is where I can directly connect to the collective. It's my entry point. It's my seat at the round table.
Well, it's also your dharma, your karma, your
Mm,
or our dharma, our karma, our work coming through these lines. So when we talked about this the other week, one of the things that I really realized, because I was trying to connect in deeper to my culture as we were having this conversation, deeper into my ancestry, beyond, beyond those beings that I mentioned, and I realized I was like, oh, my culture growing up wasn't it wasn't about wasn't about Ireland, it wasn't about Scotland, it wasn't about any of those places where I'm descended from. My culture was the church, and that brings us kind of around to the St. Patrick's thing. That's where I was indoctrinated. that's that was the reference point that I was given. And while I grew up Catholic, and there were beautiful pieces to it, it was missing a lot of the nature, a lot of the connection that I felt. I remember talking to my mom when I was little. I want to get married outside. I think getting married in the trees would be lovely. And she was like, "Oh no, oh no, we don't get married outside. We get married in the church. That's God's house." And I was like, hello, God made the trees. How could you be more in God's house than like in the trees, you know? But that was the dominating culture. And so again, that brings me around to like that St. Patrick's feel, like, having that strong connection. A lot of a lot of the magic, a lot of the deeper nature connection that we all have as humans. As humans, we are nature. So, whatever culture you're from, I believe that we have a strong nature connection. That was kind of wiped out. And it was like, nope, instead of nature, this is God's house, and this is where you go, and this is where you belong. And I think for many of us, that's a part of the problem. That's why we are outsourcing, so to speak, to other cultures. It's not just that we feel like we have a connection, because that connection, again, through other lifetimes, I'm sure is definitely there, and like Kaika said, through the world tree. And yet for us, a lot of that culture was wiped out, whitewashed, um, which is interesting because it's the similar thing, that's happened to so many other cultures and races. And here it's where we can find that connection. And what Kaika is saying is so important. Um, we have so many noises going on over here. Uh, yeah, let me bring myself back around. What Kaika was saying is so important, that we need to dig in and find these roots and bring them forward. Actually, it's funny. One of Joe's favorite songs is Pulling Up the Roots. And I feel like that's what we're doing as we dig through these layers. So, what is that deeper, stronger connection that you're looking for? And where does it actually come through in your ancestry? And how can you bring back the magic of that? I think that's part of the work that we're meant to be doing. What do you feel about that?
yeah, I think what we're talking about is decolonization,
Right.
because yeah, we all got lost. And I don't know if it was industrialization that started it, or I don't know. I'm not a history buff, but the conquering and killing and all of that, it feels like this, just this masculine sickness, of accumulating more and more and more and more and more to fill the void that would have been a healthy feminine counterpart, healthy, balanced, equalized. um Sorry, I'm not sure where I was going with this.
Well, I think it really is. It is patriarchal. There's also there's again, I try to find understanding. Like, well, where does this come from? At the end of every horoscope, I say there's more than enough love in the world for you, and I've gone over that a few times. That when I say there's more than enough love in the world for you, I mean there's more than enough food, there's more than enough money, there's more than enough water, there's more than enough resources, there's more than enough partners, lovers, connections in the world for you. And yet, so much of the world and so much of the patriarchal energy is based on fear, that lack mentality that we are told is out there. And again, this doesn't mean that you have not experienced lack, but I feel like there's no need on such an abundant planet for any of us to really, besides karmic lessons, for any of us to really experience the lack. And it's something that's perpetuated to keep these energies in power. And so the conquering, the I'm going to take this land and I'm going to take this land and I'm going to take this land. Again, we all have pieces of this within us, and we all have some of that fear, like, oh my gosh, if I don't get my plot of land, I'm going to starve, or I'm not going to have a place to go. And so again, this is where we have these roots and where we need to dig in, and where we can bring healing into ourselves and share that with others, that can bring healing on a larger global scale. But recognizing the energy, recognizing the colonization, where it's happened, that it really is a thing, not it is definitely, I think, a buzzword, colonization, and yet it's in specific groups, and it really hasn't been accepted largely because, again, I think we're all like little kindergartners, and we don't want to get in trouble. And we don't want to get in trouble for things that we think that we didn't do. And yet, again, there is responsibility in this, and recognizing it, where we can shift these things.
Well, let's talk about like responsibility to the collective, right? Like there's to me, responsibility to the collective is self-responsibility. Like the fact that I'm not going out and throwing trash out of my car window, that's self-responsibility. That's my kuleana, just to clean up my own shit, And so this is an extension of that. It's nuanced, and I think that we have to. My suggestion is well, they say that the best way to decolonize is to indigenize, and my suggestion would be calling in the indigenous ancestors, the wisdom keepers of our lineage, and I would emphasize calling in healthy ancestors, calling in the well ancestors, calling in the keepers of the wisdom, calling in the medicine ancestors, because I believe that the most toxic bloodlines produce the most potent healers. I think that's how medicine works, like it's
Homeopathy.
yeah, it's the opposite side of the coin, right?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's potent. And I want you to repeat that, calling in your healthy ancestors, calling in the medicine keepers. What was it you said? Because when you said it, when we conversed about this, it was like, yeah. And again, I feel that landing point. So just to reemphasize for people, who are the ancestors we want to connect to?
The healthy ancestors, the keepers of the wisdom, and the medicine ancestors.
Mhm. I love that. I think that's really important. And I think also recognizing, like, if you do have, again, just using my own reference point, this strong affinity for Native American, yes, definitely you may have had a past life there, but maybe in your ancestry there are druids or
Mhm.
other fairy energy. Maybe there's so many different connections to nature, and I think that's what you. That's what you're finding in that culture that hasn't been lost. And imagine bringing this up, bringing this through you, the healing that it can do for you, healing it can do for you, your family line, your ancestors. There's so much potency and power in it, and it doesn't mean, suppressing or releasing that other connection, but it's that bridging, like we said, and that healing, and that's, again, just feels really, really important.
Yeah, and I mean that doesn't mean that we cannot partake in other people's cultures whatsoever. Like I don't think that's the case. But there is a way to go about it.
Right.
And if we're rooted in our own lineages and we have a gauge in our hearts because we're connected to our ancestors, then we're gonna navigate these spaces with ease and we're gonna find acceptance a lot easier. Otherwise, there may be some tower moments, and I've had those tower moments. Um, yeah.
I just like the reference point that you brought out earlier. Like, you know how to exist in your own house, you will better, know how to treat somebody else's house. And I think also, just again, the bringing forth the point of, like, if you are not that culture in this lifetime, you know while you may have empathy, while you may have some level of understanding, you're never going to really know or experience it from that person's experience. And we need to be sensitive to what others are experiencing. Again, there's so many layers where this works, and I don't know. There's so many places where it feels really icky, marginalizing a race and then capitalizing off of, what they've brought forward. It's not right. And we just, again, we gotta clean out our own houses. We have to be very cognizant of where we are doing this. And so that's our goal in speaking about this, so that you can understand that on a greater level. So, do you have anything else that you wanted to reference in regards to these subjects?
Um, I
I know
don't know.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Be ongoing conversations. Again, I hope that we'll be doing more of these as we kind of evolve through our personal work and healing in this, and as things come up. I do know you wanted to reference something that you mentioned in the Ho'oponopono video.
Oh yeah. Okay. I wanted to apologize because I was preaching to everyone about how we should be careful with our words, and then I dropped a bomb. I used the word pronoun Nazi, and nobody called me out on it. Nobody tried to cancel me. I'm not on social media anyway, but I just felt into it, and I want to share a little bit of experience, an experience as to why I feel like I should apologize. So a couple years ago, I was walking away from a spiritual community because of the cultural appropriation that was happening, and I didn't want to be a part of it, and it was really devastating for my wife and I. And so that was happening, and I was waking up to the structures of white supremacy because I was seeing it acting out. Like I all I did was, bring up. Never mind. That doesn't matter. I was waking up to the reality of white supremacy and seeing it in the people around me. And I live in Portland. In my classroom, I was in school at the time, and I was like the only BIPOC in my class. And my teacher walked in and he said, "Happy Columbus Day to those who celebrate." And that's it. He didn't mean anything by it except Happy Columbus Day to those. I don't think that he intended anything negative. But I was tapping into my ancestors. The Taino people were the people who were devastated, decimated by Columbus. 90% of my ancestors, the language is lost. You know, um, we lost everything, and I was feeling into the rage and the grief and the hatred, and all of that was triggered in one moment, and I was in a public place, and all I could do was stare at the computer screen in front of me and hold myself together. And I have tools, okay? And this was so hard. And that being said, I think I can be sensitive in my words, you know, because we don't know how it's affecting other people, and the Jewish people have been through a lot. The word Nazi might be triggering to people, and it's not fair for me to describe trans people who just want respect as Nazis. It's not at all the same thing. It's not even close. So I'm gonna nix that, and I think I'm gonna try to only use the word Nazi when I'm referring to actual genocide or actual Nazis.
Wonderful. I think that was just a really good example though as well of being aware of where we are not aware and being aware where we can bring healing, where we can bring understanding in and through ourselves and then even share it. So thank you for your
And,
vulnerability in sharing that.
and that's not to say that like my teacher is responsible for my triggers or my wounds or what happened in the past.
Mhm.
he's he's not obligated to change his words, but if we're trying to create unity, then it just makes sense.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. And this is where it happens. This is where the healing happens. So that was a beautiful and really perfect example. So I think we're ready to wrap this up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, we would love to hear from you and what you learned from this and what your experience with all of this is. So feel free to share and comment. And I will post below the video how you can connect with Kaika and myself. And hopefully, like I said, this will be this ongoing discussion where we can learn and unwind and bring healings and help ourselves to be conscious Earth citizens. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Shaka Brada.